On the morning of February 26, 1995, the employees of Barings Bank arrived for work as normal. Barings was not a normal bank. Founded in 1762, it had survived the Napoleonic Wars, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and the fall of the British Empire. The Queen of England kept her personal accounts there. It had financed the Louisiana Purchase. It had bankrolled the British government in times of war. For 233 years, it had never failed. That morning, it was gone. Not robbed, not hacked, not attacked by a competitor. Destroyed from a single desk in Singapore by one 28-year-old man. The man's name was Nick Leeson. 3 days earlier, he had left a note on his desk that read 2 words: "I'm sorry." Then he ran. The note was found before the losses were. The losses were £827 million, more than the entire value of the bank. What happened inside Barings Bank between 1992 and 1995 is not a story about greed. It is a story about a system that wanted to believe a lie, because the lie was making them rich. Nick Leeson grew up in Watford, a working-class suburb north of London. His father was a plasterer. His family lived on a council estate. He was not exceptional in school. He had no university degree. In 1985, at 18 years old, he walked into a bank and asked for a job. They gave him one. He was a clerk. He pushed paper. But Nick Leeson had something that no degree teaches. He could read people. He could sell confidence. He could make anyone believe the numbers were fine. He moved from Coutts Bank to Morgan Stanley, from Morgan Stanley to Barings. At Barings, he was assigned to the back office, the settlement department. Settlement is the invisible engine of banking. When a trader makes a trade, settlement makes sure the money actually moves. It was considered unglamorous, junior, the kind of work serious traders didn't want to do. Leeson was brilliant at it. He understood the mechanics of trades from the inside out, from the hidden plumbing of the financial system. In the late 1980s, the City of London was changing. Thatcher's Big Bang deregulation had thrown open the doors of British finance. For the first time, working-class men with sharp instincts could compete with Eton-educated bankers. Nick Leeson understood this perfectly. He arrived at Barings in 1989. Within 2 years, he was indispensable. He fixed a settlement crisis in Jakarta that senior staff had failed to resolve for months. He flew to Indonesia. He sorted the books. He came home. Barings noticed. That knowledge would later become his most dangerous weapon. In 1992, Barings Bank made a decision that would cost it everything. They sent Nick Leeson to Singapore. The assignment was to set up and run a new futures trading operation on the Singapore International Monetary Exchange, SIMEX. He was 25 years old. He had never managed a trading floor. Singapore in 1992 was electric. Asia was booming. The Japanese Nikkei index was producing extraordinary returns. Barings wanted a piece of it. The SIMEX trading floor was one of the most competitive environments in Asian finance. Traders from every major bank competed for positions in Japanese equity futures. Leeson thrived in it. He had a physical presence on the floor. He was loud, fast, confident. The Singapore traders had a nickname for him. They called him the Big Swinging Dick of SIMEX. He wore it like a badge. So they gave Nick Leeson 2 jobs. He would be the head trader, buying and selling on the floor. He would also be the head of back-office operations, recording and settling those same trades. These 2 roles should never be held by the same person. One is the person who makes the trade. The other is the person who checks whether the trade was legitimate. Giving both jobs to one man is the equivalent of asking someone to mark their own exam. Barings knew this. An internal audit flagged the arrangement as a control risk in 1994. London read the audit. Then they did nothing. There was one more structural problem. Barings Singapore had no risk management function. No one in Singapore was independently monitoring Leeson's positions. And no one in London had the technical knowledge to understand what he was actually doing. The people signing off on his reports did not fully understand the instruments he was trading. This is not unusual in finance. It is, however, catastrophic when combined with everything else Barings had already done, because Nick Leeson was making them money. Spectacular money. Money that made the risk feel theoretical. On July 3, 1992, a junior member of his team made a mistake. She sold futures contracts that a client had actually wanted to buy. The error cost the client £20,000. It was a small mistake, the kind that happens in every trading operation. The correct response was simple: report the error, absorb the cost, move on. Leeson didn't do that. He opened an account number 88888. Error accounts are standard at trading firms. They exist to catch small booking mistakes before they hit the main ledger. Leeson put the £20,000 loss into 88888 and made a decision. He would trade his way out of it. He would make enough profit in the coming days to cancel the loss, then close the account as if nothing had happened. He almost succeeded. Almost. By the end of September 1992, account 88888 had £6 million in losses. The original error was £20,000. In 3 months, Leeson had turned a small correction into a catastrophe. Leeson had a specific method for hiding the growing losses. He would report fictional profits on certain trades to London. The fictional profits offset the real losses. On paper, the difference between them was buried in account 88888. To create the fictional profits, he needed London to send him money. He requested funds for margin calls, legitimate requests that trading operations make routinely. But the margin calls were larger than they needed to be. The excess quietly filled the hole. It was circular. The lie funded itself until it couldn't anymore. And nobody at Barings in London knew the account existed. To the outside world, Nick Leeson was a star. In 1993, his Singapore operation generated £10 million in profit. That was 10% of Barings Bank's entire annual income. From one desk in Singapore. His bonus was £130,000. His salary was $50,000. London loved him. The board praised him. Senior management flew out to meet him in Singapore and shook his hand. Behind the performance, account 88888 was bleeding. Every day, Leeson would make legitimate trades that generated real profits. Every day, he would also make unauthorized trades, trying to dig out of the loss. The legitimate trades created the illusion. The unauthorized trades created the reality. In his autobiography, Leeson describes the period between 1993 and 1994 as the worst of his life. Not because of the losses, because of the performance. Every morning he put on the suit. Every morning he walked onto the trading floor with the same confidence. Every morning the people around him saw a man who had everything under control. He describes coming home at night, sitting in the dark, unable to sleep. His wife Lisa knew something was wrong. He told her it was work pressure. She believed him. Everyone believed him. That was the most exhausting part. By the end of 1993, the 88888 account had £23 million in hidden losses. By the end of 1994, £208 million. The number was no longer a mistake he could correct. It was the size of a small country's annual budget, and it was growing every day. The question is not why Nick Leeson kept lying. The question is why Barings kept believing him. Leeson was sending millions of pounds from London to Singapore, officially for trading margin requirements. In 1994 alone, London transferred £350 million to Singapore. Nobody in London stopped to ask what the money was actually being used for, because the returns were extraordinary. When someone is making you rich, you stop asking questions. There is a concept in organizational psychology called motivated reasoning. It describes the tendency to find reasons to believe what you want to be true. Barings was a textbook case. Every time a warning sign appeared, someone found a reason to dismiss it. The dual role was a risk, but the profits were too good. The margin calls were large, but Singapore was a growing operation. The audit recommendation was uncomfortable, but Leeson was the star. The institution had built a story about Nick Leeson. The story was, he is exceptional, and exceptional people produce results that ordinary oversight cannot explain, so you stop trying to explain them. There was a second reason the system failed. Leeson had designed account 88888 to be invisible. He modified the error account so that the daily reports sent to London excluded it entirely. The account existed. It was real. It sat inside Barings' own systems, but it was never printed, never transmitted, never reviewed. It was a hole in the balance sheet that nobody was looking for, because the balance sheet looked perfect. In 1994, an internal auditor from London visited Singapore. The auditor identified the dual role as a risk. The auditor recommended that the arrangement be changed. The recommendation was filed. Nothing was changed. On January 16, 1995, Nick Leeson made his biggest bet. He placed a short straddle on both the Singapore and Tokyo stock exchanges. The bet assumed one thing, that the Japanese market would stay stable. At 5:46 in the morning on January 17th, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck the Japanese city of Kobe. 6,434 people died. The Japanese Nikkei index fell 7% in a single week. Leeson's entire position collapsed. To understand what Leeson did after the earthquake, you need to understand his psychology. He had been in impossible positions before and traded his way out. Not always, but enough times that he believed it was possible. The earthquake was a shock event. Shock events correct. That was his logic. Markets recover. He just needed to hold, so he kept buying. By late January 1995, Leeson held 49% of all open Nikkei futures contracts on CIMEX. One man, half the market. Other traders noticed. They didn't know why someone was buying so aggressively. They just knew someone was, and they sold into it. The market fell further. Leeson bought more. He bought more than 20,000 Nikkei futures contracts, betting that the market would recover. It didn't. In 3 weeks after the earthquake, the losses in account 88888 went from 208 million to 827 million pounds. The total capital reserves of Barings Bank were 440 million pounds. The losses were twice the entire bank. On February 23, 1995, Nick Leeson arrived at his desk in Singapore. He wrote a note. 2 words, "I'm sorry." He left it on his desk. Then he took his wife, went to the airport, and boarded a flight. He didn't know where he was going. He flew to Kuala Lumpur, then Brunei, then Bangkok, then Frankfurt. On the same day Leeson fled, Barings executives in London began receiving calls. Cymex was demanding margin payments that Barings could not explain. The Singapore office could not reach Leeson. His phone went unanswered. His desk was empty. A colleague found the note. Senior management in London were called into emergency meetings. They spent the first hours assuming it was an administrative error, the kind of thing Leeson would sort out when he was back in the office. He was not coming back to the office. At Frankfurt Airport, German police were waiting. Back in London, Barings Bank's management finally opened account 8888. The losses were £827 million. Every senior executive in the building had assumed someone else was watching Singapore. Nobody was. The Bank of England Governor Eddie George was contacted directly. He spent the weekend attempting to organize a rescue. No buyer could be found at any price that covered the losses. On Sunday, February 26th, the rescue attempt was formally abandoned. Barings Bank was placed into administration. 200 employees came to work on Monday morning. Some of them had worked there for decades. They were told the bank no longer existed. 233 years of operation, the Queen's Bank, the bank that financed America's expansion, the bank that survived Napoleon, gone. 3 days later, ING, a Dutch bank, purchased the entire institution. The purchase price was £1. Nick Leeson was extradited to Singapore. He was sentenced to 6.5 years in Changi prison. In prison, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. He survived. He was released in 1999. Here's the detail that most coverage of this story leaves out. Nick Leeson was not a genius fraudster. He was not sophisticated. He did not use advanced financial instruments to hide his trades. He took losses and put them in an account that nobody at London headquarters ever asked to see. For 3 years. That is not a story about a clever criminal. That is a story about a system that was designed, whether deliberately or not, to avoid uncomfortable information. Barings was sending hundreds of millions of pounds to Singapore with minimal oversight. Their own auditors flagged the problem in writing. Nothing changed. The official verdict was that Barings was negligent. The unofficial question, the one that Leeson himself raised in interviews, is harder. When a bank willingly ignores every warning sign because the profits are too good to question, who is really responsible for what happens next? In 2023, Nick Leeson gave a series of interviews to mark the 28th anniversary of the collapse. He was 56 years old, silver-haired, calm. He said something that most interviewers glossed over. He said, "I was not the only person who knew things were wrong." He did not elaborate. He has never elaborated. The official investigations concluded that Barings was negligent, but not complicit. The distinction matters legally. Whether it matters morally is a different question. 30 years later, no one has been held criminally responsible except Leeson himself. The executives who signed off on the Singapore transfers without asking questions retired with their pensions. The auditors who filed their recommendation and moved on continued their careers. The institution was sold for £1. The man who destroyed it served 4 years and became a motivational speaker. Everyone else went home. The Barings collapse changed banking regulation forever. New rules were written. New oversight systems were built. The dual role that Leeson held was banned in every major financial jurisdiction worldwide. But the deeper question, the one Nick Leeson raised in 2023, has never been formally answered. Some financial crimes end in prison sentences. Some end in knighthoods. What happened at Barings ended in both, depending on which desk you sat at. If this story made you think, there are more where this came from. DOSSIER covers the financial crimes, corporate failures, and human decisions that changed history. Every story is verified, every detail is sourced. Subscribe, and we will see you on the next dossier.